Comey was spying on Trump. Well, the reason he was writing the memos was to create a record so that he could destroy
No
him.
American knowingly colluded with the Russians to interfere in our election campaigns. Oh, wait, unless you mean Hillary Clinton.
Pardons, prosecutions, and transparency.
Another big issue, obviously, and it's come up in the debates repeatedly between President Trump and the former Vice President Biden about China and coronavirus. And our friends at the Daily Caller News Foundation asked the NIH specifically for documents about WHO, China, and coronavirus. And the documents were Dr. Fauci's emails and the emails of his top deputy. So needless to say, they got the Stonewall. And so Judicial Watch came to the rescue to file a lawsuit on behalf of the Daily Caller News Foundation. And the response was Stonewall delay. In fact, they found documents, they did the initial search, but they didn't want to turn over any of them till after the election. And a federal court judge says, no, you got to at least begin giving us the first batch before the election, which was October 21st. So we finally got the documents last night or yesterday, and they show the following. They show that a WHO entity, let me call it up here, was oddly focused on pushing out a friendly press release for China. This is, again, during the beginning of the pandemic. And the entity is the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board, which is an entity convened by the World Health Organization and World Bank. And they wrote an email on January 27th, 2020. And this was before they knew the full scope of the virus and all of that. It was called a time-sensitive message from the GPMB, this WHO body, co-chairs, review of a draft GPMB statement on the 2019 novel coronavirus. There was a consensus for the GPMB to issue a statement supportive of countries, especially China, they write in parentheses, and WHO response efforts, and to call for urgent action to further strengthen global preparedness and response to this outbreak. Please find attached a draft statement. On January 29th, Fauci responds, looks fine, please see my comments and attached document. Of course, they didn't provide the draft comments, which is typical, inappropriate, but typical. And so you've got this WHO entity pushing for this statement to be released about COVID with a focus on praising China. And of course, it was done because I went and looked online to see, well, okay, what statement was actually issued. And this is what the statement says. The Global Preparedness Monitoring Board, GPMB, as I said, convened on January 27, 2020 to discuss the current outbreak of the 2019 nCoV, which is the novel coronavirus, COVID, which was first detected in Wuhan, China, and is now quickly spreading internationally. The board commends the speed of the response so far by countries and the World Health Organization, the transparency of China in sharing information and the genome sequence of the virus, and the strong collaboration between China and affected countries and with WHO. So I don't need to tell you about the controversy in the way China handled this in terms of targeting those who were blowing the whistle internally on it, delaying disclosure to key entities about what was going on in China, and other problems. And isn't it interesting that WHO's and this front for WHO, because I keep on calling it the GMPB, it's really WHO. Their collective concern is it's clear in the email about praising China's role here. It helps explain why they didn't want to turn over this document, doesn't it? And I think it's real interesting. There are other emails here that kind of show you the back and forth, and they're interesting to read. But this is the big stuff. And I don't know what else is out there, but I tell you, it is exceedingly frustrating that agencies presumably nominally run by the President of the United States continue to withhold information. And I'm convinced they withhold information because it can be seen to be helpful to him as opposed to hurting him. That's the way that's what's been happening. It's been relatively consistent. Dr. Fauci, according to the government, is the reason it's slowed down is because he has to review all these emails, which is nonsensical. As I wrote in our statement, these Fauci emails show how praising China was the odd priority of the WHO in the face of a novel and dangerous coronavirus, that the NIH tried to slow roll the release of these emails and is still sitting on thousands more as a scandal. So they've only reviewed 300 pages. There are 4,200 pages that they've found, and they're going to release them monthly. So now what's 3 into 42? 12 is 36, 14 months. So we won't be able to see these documents until 2022 in their entirety. I jokingly say we'll be in a Chelsea Clinton administration before we see all the documents the deep state is hiding from us. And as our friends over at the Daily Caller News Foundation, the now government says, Neil Patel, the government is now ever so slowly complying with the law and letting the American people know how they did business with WHO and China at the outset of this pandemic. We are grateful to Judicial Watch for helping us force the government to do its job, which is to follow the law. Oh boy. And what I found interesting about these emails, now admittedly, it's only a small portion of the documents, but they don't show, at least in this batch, that they saw this as a dramatic virus initially. You can go and look at the documents, and I encourage you to review them themselves. There's no indication that this was like a high red alert issue. I mean, they were moving people to try to study it. That's clear. But it's pretty clear early on, they didn't see it as the contagion that we've since come to learn it was or threatened to be. They didn't kind of know about it, probably because the Chinese weren't telling them about it. And, it looked like they were deferential to the Chinese here in the emails. Why praise them when you really didn't know what was going on? I mean, in my view, if you're dealing with the Chinese Communist government, you should be skeptical of them and just presume they're lying about everything. I mean, my view is you should be skeptical when the government tells you pretty much anything, even in a democratic or constitutional republic. Why would we believe anything in the Chinese, that the communist government in China would be telling us on something obviously they would have a significant political interest in minimizing? But that's the way things work, and that's what Dr. Fauci approved according to these new emails. So we'll see what else is happening, and we'll talk about it later. I'll give you updates as we get more documents as they come in. But again, the president should just order the release of every document they have. Do it now. Do it now. The government can release it. When they say it takes months and months and years, it's just excuses. That's not reasons. It's the government. They can do whatever they want. So it's frustrating. You may recall we asked for Hillary Clinton's deposition, and we received it from a lower court judge. Our request was granted on her emails and Benghazi attack records. She took the extraordinary step of seeking mandamus relief, which is an extraordinary type of relief, only really granted on an emergency basis to people. To compare and contrast, General Flynn sought emergency mandamus relief from Judge Sullivan, refusing essentially to immediately dismiss his criminal case, despite a request from the Justice Department. So it goes up to this appellate court, and the panel says that Hillary Clinton essentially gets a special dispensation from having to testify. They ignore court precedent. They say that FOIA, no one can ask any questions about FOIA except, the person, you can only ask whether they searched where they were supposed to, and only the searchers you can ask. But we're not allowed to ask someone who walked off with 60,000 pages of records what they were doing. Obviously, that eviscerates FOIA. And typically, what Hillary Clinton was doing is that she had intervened, was given permissive intervention, it's called. So she was kind of like a party. But typically, when you're in that situation and you don't get a decision you like, you have to appeal it after the case is done, more or less. No, that wasn't what Hillary Clinton got to do. They just let her bypass the law and the rules there, cut in line, more or less, and give her benefits that no one else would be able to get in terms of law and the ability to challenge our right to question her under oath. So we sought what is called an en banc appeal. So you have a 3-judge panel at the appellate court. Judge Lamberth ruled in our favor. Hillary Clinton moved to the appellate court for the mandamus, a 3-judge panel. And then there's an en banc panel of the full appellate court in the district that we're seeking review, in which we're seeking review or rehearing. So we'll see how that goes. I don't have a release officially yet on our filing, which was late yesterday, but you'll be able to see it online probably over the weekend or on Monday, certainly by Monday. But it is frustrating because General Flynn didn't get mandamus relief. And that's one of the things we want the court to clarify for the American public and frankly for us in terms of the law. Why is it that General Flynn is told he's got to wait to appeal an adverse ruling or something by Judge Sullivan before he gets any relief, but Hillary Clinton doesn't have to wait? Why did General Flynn get different treatment than Hillary Clinton? And of course, General Flynn did not win his mandamus relief. So that's the big question we have. And so we're not giving up on the Hillary Clinton issue. And what's exceedingly frustrating is that the court, the Justice Department and State Department rushed to the lower court to try to shut down all of our other discovery based on this pro-Hillary Clinton ruling. So we are facing and fighting the Justice Department and the State Department as they try to cover up and prevent us from getting more information about what went on with Hillary Clinton's emails, information that the court already authorized us to get. They're trying to get the court to pull it back. What a betrayal of everyone who thought that there would be a change of pace in the Justice Department and State Department with President Trump. If I were President Trump, I'd go in and say, stop doing this. Why are you defending Hillary Clinton? Why are you defending her email misconduct? Why are you defending the Obama State Department and Justice Department cover-up of all this? What's going on? Getting zero help. Now, by the way, the Justice Department can appeal this too. They haven't done it. They opposed us wanting to question Hillary Clinton in the lower court, but when she made this desperate mandamus appeal, they said, well, that's not appropriate. That's not what it's for. So they kind of agreed. They did agree with us. They didn't want to actually argue the case, though. They actually were literally forced to come in to argue against Hillary Clinton. That's how awful they are. That's how awful it is over there. Even when they disagree with her on her law, they don't even want to show up in court to oppose her. And they're not appealing this ruling that eviscerates FOIA. Because if this court decision goes through as it is, you can have then Hillary Clinton come back into the Biden administration, Attorney General or something, do it all over again, and we wouldn't be able to ask her a darn question, nor would anyone else, at least under the FOIA law. Does that make sense to you? Of course it doesn't. So we'll see how the court rules. I think we'll probably hear relatively quickly, probably in the next month or so. So we'll see. I'll keep you apprised. We've had other developments since we last talked. I want to talk about first General Flynn, who finally has been given a pardon by President Trump. A well-deserved pardon. He was lawlessly targeted as part of a conspiracy to destroy the Trump presidency and the Trump campaign by the Obama gang. They lied about what Flynn was doing. They knew he was innocent. The documents show they knew he was innocent, yet they prosecuted him anyway and abused his civil rights. And Judge Sullivan in this case has been acting, who's the judge who's been handling the criminal case, has been abusing his power in a way that is just simply shocking, just shocking from a federal judge. Yet the Justice Department try to end the case, and Judge Sullivan, is contrary to law, and orders from the appellate court just simply refused to do so. Obviously hoping that a Biden administration will come in and reverse the Justice Department decision to drop the case and further harass and try to make a political prisoner out of General Flynn. So God bless General Flynn and his family, who I know has been placed been abused in so many ways. I mean, he was a prisoner in his own home. I mean, he couldn't travel the way, just because he wasn't in jail doesn't mean he had the freedom and civil rights any other American did. He was still subject to the jurisdiction of the court. It's like he was on probation, practically speaking. So now he's a free man. He wasn't a free man before the pardon. He was not a free man. And if I were President Trump, I'd go on a pardon tear. This is the mantra: pardons, prosecutions, and transparency. He should pardon everyone caught up in the Mueller investigation. I know the left is trying to scare him from pardoning his family and pardoning himself and giving preemptive pardons. Of course, he has the power to do that. And they don't want him to do that because they want to prosecute his family. They want to prosecute President Trump at the federal level. They are never going to stop harassing and abusing him, and he should pardon. He should pardon Manafort. I'd even pardon his corrupt lawyer, Cohen. Believe it or not, I don't think he should pardon Hillary Clinton. I don't think he should pardon Joe Biden. But he should pardon everyone who was targeted by Mueller, because those investigations were tainted. We also found out that Attorney General Barr appointed Durham as special prosecutor or special counsel in October. I think it was October 19th, 3 weeks before the election. Of course, he didn't tell anyone in America about it, at least anyone publicly. So that was withheld from the American people. Isn't it interesting how all these Justice Department decisions tend to go towards protecting the swamp, the Obama gang, and hurting President Trump? Now, I know it's not always that way, but isn't it amazing how they all tend to do that? Now, our friend Andy McCarthy has suggested that under the Justice Department regulations that Durham can't really even be a special prosecutor because special prosecutors are supposed to come from outside the Justice Department. But I guess the Attorney General can do whatever he wants, right? Now, I'm not as excited about Durham being a special prosecutor as because I don't think it really means that much, other than it makes it harder if Joe Biden is ultimately selected president for Biden to come in and interfere with the prosecution or whatever Durham's doing. And as I keep on telling you, I don't think he's doing much. I don't think he's doing much. I've seen no evidence that there's going to be significant prosecutions of significant figures. In fact, in this interview, which Barr talked to dissed evidence about voter fraud, he suggested that the scope of Durham's inquiry has narrowed considerably to only focus on the Crossfire hurricane investigation, the opening of it. Of course, we already knew it's corrupt and full of lies because Judicial Watch already has proven it. So I don't know why he needs. It's now April of last year he was appointed. So we're now coming up on the 2-year anniversary this April of the appointment of John Durham, and we've had one prosecution, and it was a prosecution that was handed to him on a silver platter. And this guy, Mr. Kleinsmith, the FBI lawyer who messed with lied and altered documents to ensure Carter Page would get his illicit FISA warrant targeting him and Trump. He's going to be sentenced, or supposed to be sentenced, next week. I think on maybe it's next Friday, December 10th, whatever that day is. Not much is happening. So by narrowing it, you can bet that Brennan isn't going to face prosecution or anyone else of that nature. Of course, he hasn't talked to Obama. He hasn't talked to Biden. He hasn't talked to Hillary Clinton. At least there's no evidence he's talked to any of those people. None of them have gone before grand juries, right? We'd know about it if that happened. So it's a big fail. And I don't know what the president has planned. I'm sure, he's kind of in a hard situation because he thinks, I think with some justification, that he won. But the entire establishment is trying to push him out the door. So he's got to kind of plan to be there, and plus also plan to leave potentially, right? So I'm suggesting these ideas because they work whether or not he stays or goes. Appoint 3 special counsels. 1 for Joe Biden, 1 for Obamagate, 1 for election fraud. And if Barr won't do it, because Durham isn't doing it. And I don't mean special counsel by bringing in some U.S. attorney who has the loser Justice Department approach that we seem to get a lot out of. I mean, bring in an outsider and let them do an investigation of the Justice Department. Keep the FBI out of it. I mean, a serious independent special prosecutor. You can ask Barr for advice who might be a good guy, but they shouldn't answer to the Barr. They should answer to the White House. Justice Department is compromised. Oh, we have to have independent investigations. No, that's not what the Constitution says. The Justice Department, did you vote the Justice Department to run the country? I didn't. I voted for the president to run the country. I mean, Joe Biden talks about an independent Justice Department. That's unconstitutional. I mean, we have to be consistent. Even if Biden is president, we should recognize that the president has the authority to run the Justice Department. So special prosecutors galore. Transparency, get all the documents out, declassify. There are other documents that have been withheld or being stonewalled that they should accelerate the release of. And as I said, all of that can be done whether or not the president is staying or going. And it should be done sooner rather than later, meaning now. If you want something right, do it yourself, right? And that's what the president needs to do. He can't rely on Attorney General Barr anymore. He just can't. And it doesn't. I keep on going back, and I guess it's irrelevant because I like a lot of people who I disagree with. Because I'm sure Barr and I would have a very friendly discussion about how things have been going, right? And I'm sure he'd be very persuasive on some points, but it's just the proof is in the pudding, and the pudding ain't there. So Judicial Watch was in the news again this week because we were in the news last week, because we uncovered what is perhaps the biggest scandal of the modern, of the Justice Department in the last 3 years or 4 years. I guess other than the spying on Trump, other than the illegal prosecution of General Flynn. But here we have the Mueller team that was purported to be the enforcers of the rule of law, making sure that President Trump wasn't a crook, right? Harassing him, investigating him, targeting others around him with absurd and overblown charges, in my view. And it turns out, as Judicial Watch uncovered, they've been caught erasing all their phones. Or 27 of them, or 31, depends how you count, if they were erased or destroyed or whatever. But many of them, including 2 by Andrew Weissman, who is one of the infamous members of Mueller's team, were wiped because they put their passwords in too many times. Well, as you know, that's just baloney. If you're watching me, you've probably never wiped your phone accidentally or even on purpose. One of the phones magically wiped themselves. Well, our revelations caused a mini firestorm, but because it's criminality by the Mueller team, the media isn't interested in covering much of it. If it were President Trump and his team, or anyone who's on the wrong side of the hard left, you would have been talking about, we would have been hearing comparisons to Nixon. So 27 phones wiped by the Mueller team is a yawner for the dishonest liberal media. But it isn't a yawner for the American people who are outraged by this. There's been a groundswell of outrage, so much so that members of Congress have reacted. You had Senator Grassley and Senator Johnson file up and demand an investigation from the IG, wanting to know why the IG hadn't done anything on this, because these were essentially IG documents that documented that not only were these phones wiped, but also that Page and Strzok's phones were also similarly either not turned in or also were set, quote, to factory settings in the case of Lisa Page. So the IG had this information, didn't do much anything about it. Doug Collins sent a letter to Apple, I guess it was Apple phones, asking Apple to explain how it is how is it phones get wiped with, how is it Apple phones can get wiped? Because as it's been made clear to me, it's hard. The theory is you put in your password like 15 times in a row and it wipes you. Well, no one really ever does that. And Apple doesn't even makes it hard to do it. You have to do it over a period of time, or they're kind of, they're not going to ruin their customers' phones simply because they put a password in once or twice incorrectly. So how is it done? And my point is that I don't know specifically. Of course, it doesn't make sense intellectually, but Congressman Collins is asking for details so that we have a clearer understanding of what was going on. And the big question is, where's the Justice Department? Where's Durham? Where's Attorney General Barr? I don't think he's made any comment on this yet. I mean, if I were him, I'd be sending the FBI or the Marshal Service or an independent agency to the appropriate office in the Justice Department and have it raided. Who raids the Justice Department when there's obstruction of justice and destruction of evidence? I don't know. I'm sure they can find someone. Maybe they can bring in the Postal Inspector Service and all sorts of law enforcement agencies that, postal inspectors they're not dumb. They do some good work. U.S. Marshal Service is within the Justice Department, but has kind of an independent streak. DHS has investigators. The military has investigators. There's all sorts of investigators that can be dragooned. In my view, the president should dragoon them, or deploy them, to put it more correctly, to investigate this scandal, because this is destruction of evidence and potential obstruction of justice. We know it's destruction of evidence. The question is, was it purposeful or not? And the evidence suggests it was, which would make it a crime. And so we have to keep on pushing for it. And the frustrating thing is that this same Justice Department is defending the indefensible with Hillary Clinton, as I've been discussing with you, slow walking the release of documents about the same group, especially Lisa Page and Peter Strzok. Now, so what's going to happen with Durham? I don't know. I still don't think much is going to happen. Peter Strzok was asked by CBS News the other day whether he was a target and refused of the Durham investigation and refused to answer the question. So maybe he is a target. I don't know. Maybe Peter Strzok gets indicted. I don't know. But you had all these deposition subpoenas issued by Senator Johnson, or at least they were authorized by Senator Johnson and Senator Lindsey Graham at the Judiciary Committee is bringing in people, including, I think, James Comey. And my view is they wouldn't be inviting or deposing these people if they were at serious risk of prosecution. I mean, what happens is the Justice Department makes a phone call, Senator Graham and Attorney General Barr get on the phone, and Barr says, hey, look, you can't be bringing in Comey in. We're just about to indict him. And it wouldn't happen. And the fact that it's happening suggests that Durham isn't going to do anything much against these key people, if even the lower level people like Strzok. Not that Strzok wasn't key, but he was, let's say, I would say he was 1, 2, 3, he was 4 levels down. The level 3, 2, and 1 people, they're not going to get indicted. I just don't see it happening. And if it doesn't happen, the president should appoint a special counsel. Because in my view, the failure to indict or prosecute these folks for what went on would be an improper political decision. It's not a law and order decision. It would be a political decision. And frankly, if they're going to be making we shouldn't have a U.S. attorney making a political decision of that import. They should have input from, yes, the President of the United States. Because that's the only way things are going to get done. The President's got to take control of this investigation. Justice Department can't investigate itself. It just can't. And we're expecting it to do. We're expecting it to do that, and we're always disappointed. And I'm telling you, it's inevitable that you're going to be disappointed because you're having the agency investigate itself. That's why I've been calling for separate investigations, and that's why Judicial Watch exists. So we can provide, as best we're able to, the oversight. As I said, we wouldn't know anything about these white phones but for Judicial Watch. It'd still be covered up. So I'll keep you updated on that as the weeks go on. Judicial Watch today issued a very important report about the state of our election rolls. And our analysis has found, and we've done analyses like this in the past, but we've updated the data to the most recent election data or voter registration data the states have produced. And our study has found, as of September 2020, I think we checked all the numbers up to the latest numbers. Our study has found that 353 U.S. counties in 29 states have voter registration rates exceeding 100%. That means they have more people on the rolls than are living there and eligible to vote, according to the best, most recent census data, which goes, I think, through 2018. So when you count up all the voters that are, quote, extra, meaning the number of voters over 100%, what number do you come up with? 1.8 million extra names on the rolls, at least. Again, this is a partial examination of the states because not all the states put up the data. I think 13 states don't put up the data. Some states put up data that's shady, so we can't rely on it. 8 states, it's not just a county in the state, but the state overall has a registration rate over 100%. And those states are Alaska, Colorado, Maine, Maryland, Michigan, New Jersey, Rhode Island, and Vermont. Our study collected the most recent registration data posted online by the states themselves. The data was then compared to the Census Bureau's most recent 5-year population estimates gathered by the American Community Survey from 2014 through 2018. Those surveys are sent to 3.5 million addresses per month, each month, and its 5-year estimates are considered to be the most reliable estimates outside of the decennial census. So we have the census done every 10 years, right? But in the intermediate, they've got the census is always counting. So that's what that's referring to. Judicial Watch's latest study is necessarily limited to 37 states that post regular updates to their registration data. Certain state voter registration lists may also be even larger than reported because they may have excluded inactive voters from their data. That's a little trick, because inactive voters who may have moved elsewhere are still registered voters and may vote up and may show up and vote on election day and or request absentee or mail-in ballots. So you just say, well, I've got 15 registered voters here. Well, what about those other voters? Oh, well, they're inactive. Well, can't they show up and vote? Yes. Well, can they ask for a ballot? Yes. So why aren't they with the 15? Well, they're inactive. I mean, that's the garbage logic we have to deal with, the insane logic we have to deal with when we fight these battles. Now, Judicial Watch relies on studies like this to warn states to clean up their rolls. And some states actually react positively. They say, well, we're going to clean up. Some counties clean up. Because the National Voter Registration Act requires states to take reasonable steps to clean up the rolls. Now, as you know, we have, or you should know if you don't already, 3 states in federal court right now, North Carolina, and counties in those states, Colorado, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania. In North Carolina and Pennsylvania alone, it looks like there are as many as 2 million extra names on the rolls. A little bit less than 2 million. Colorado, I'm not sure what the number is. I think it's 100,000 or so. I'm not sure. 2/3 of the state's counties and Colorado's had registration rates exceeding 100%. There's no good reason for that. I mean, even if the population bumped up a little bit, even if you had more people registering before the election, having a registration rate over 100% is unacceptable. And it shows why it is reckless for states to mail blindly ballots and ballot applications to people who haven't asked for them. Right now, they're gone out. Mostly they've gone out because it's coming pretty close to the election. 100 million ballots and ballot applications are being mailed to people who haven't asked for them. This is the distinction the president has tried to make. It's one thing to have an absentee ballot requested from a voter, and the voter asks for it, and then it's sent, and the voter sends it back. I don't think that's the most secure way to vote. It's still subject to fraud because, as I point out, or as the study points out, or suggests, when you've got dirty voting rolls, you can have dirty elections, because if the name is on the list that it's a bad name, it's still there for someone else to use for fraudulent purposes if they want. And you may say, well, there's all these security checks for absentee ballots. Well, there are some security checks. They're not sufficient in my view. Some don't have signature checks. The left is trying to undermine other security checks, such as witness requirements. You want a list of the states where the numbers are bad, where they have counties over 100%? Here it is. And it's not all blue. It's a mix. It's red and blue, meaning Republican and Democrat-oriented states. Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, Colorado, Florida, Georgia, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, Oregon, Rhode Island, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Vermont, Virginia, Washington, and West Virginia. So all of those states have counties in them that have voter registration rolls that are out of whack. Some of those states don't just have counties, it's the entire state. The entire state is a problem. And again, those states are Alaska, Colorado, Maine, Maryland, Michigan, New Jersey, Rhode Island, and Vermont. So this is important data. It highlights the dangers of mail-in voting, how reckless it is, and the importance of Judicial Watch's work to clean up the rolls, don't you think? Don't you think? So Judicial Watch's litigation will continue in that regard, and as the election comes closer, we are monitoring what else is going wrong in the system, and I encourage you to communicate directly with us if you're aware of any issues like that. Don't go asking and confronting people in the polling places or start yelling at workers and things like that. Don't do that. You report to the proper authorities any issues and tell us what's going on, and we'll see if we can follow up. So this data shows 1.8 million extra names in just 29 states. Tip of the iceberg. Our voting rolls are a mess, and the politicians and the political class, knowing that, are mailing blindly into them anyway. That's why I'm upset. That's why I'm concerned about election day chaos. That's why I'm concerned about voter fraud. Judicial Watch sued the Adam Schiff and the House Intelligence Committee for those secret subpoenas he issued to get the phone records of Rudy Giuliani and other Americans and then published them. And we sued in federal court, alleging that we had a common law right to access to government records. And the court, in an opinion issued by Judge Beryl Howe, said that Adam Schiff can keep his records secret. Schiff claims sovereign immunity, which the court suggested probably wasn't appropriate, the speech or debate clause privilege. Now, we suggested that it was an impeachment effort, was judicial-like proceeding as the court has found, and therefore wasn't subjected to the speech or debate clause privilege. And certainly given the misconduct, there are other issues that should have been considered by the court as well. Because if you can't get, if you're a police officer or the FBI and they tried to get a subpoena of your phone records without court authorization, it would be illegal. Congress is taking the position, your Congress, under House Leader Pelosi and Schiff, that they can subpoena secretly your phone records and publish them without accountability. You can't even ask for the subpoena. They take the position they shouldn't even have to get court authorization to take your private papers. And it's outrageous that a court would uphold that misconduct from any scrutiny. The way I read this decision, the lawyers may get nervous when I start interpreting court opinions, that they can do this with impunity. Forget about the accountability in terms of figuring out what they did. That they could send someone to raid your home, perhaps, under their own power and not be subject to scrutiny or accountability for it. It's concerning, don't you think? And of course, Adam Schiff did this corruptly. I mean, it was the president's lawyer he targeted, Rudy Giuliani. The president has a right to counsel. And he blew up that right to counsel by trying to take his secret records. Schiff should be impeached. Oh, I know. The left will tell you that congressmen can't be impeached. Actually, that's not true. Of course they can be impeached. Whether it will be successful or not is another matter. it's pretty much a good rule of thumb that whenever you hear something interesting about, oh, well, this can be done, this can't be done, and you hear the media say, oh, that can't be done, experts say, you can pretty much rule it out that you can pretty much reject the notion or reject the media's analysis. So when they say, oh, that can't be done, it's usually not the case. In the case of Adam Schiff, he can be impeached. There's nothing in the Constitution that protects a member of Congress from not being impeached. Now, a member was previously impeached in the 19th century, and the Senate refused to convict him. So that has been seen as like a bar to impeachment, but it just suggests that the Senate doesn't like the idea of impeaching a member of Congress, but doesn't mean they can't. So we don't believe the judge's decision was correct. Whether we appeal it is another question. But again, it was Judicial Watch who went to court to try to hold Adam Schiff accountable for abusing the constitutional rights of Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani. And remember, the published phone records that Giuliani and others that he published included Devin Nunes, the member of Congress, John Solomon, the reporter. I think Jay Sekulo's records were published. Victoria Tenzing and Joe Geneva, I think their records were published as well. So he violated the constitutional rights of many innocent Americans. Yes, innocent Americans, just so he could pursue his coup attack on President Trump. And a federal court ruled that Judicial Watch can't get access to the records documenting that abuse. So irrespective of the court decision, I want you to remember that they are taking the position, the House is, that they can secretly subpoena your phone records and publish them without accountability. That you can't go to court to get the access to what they did, or perhaps even sue them for abusing your rights. So again, Judicial Watch isn't forgetting about Schiff's corruption. And if I were the president, given not only this corruption, but his evident penchant for leaking and his dishonesty in working with the inside coup plotter, the whistleblower, I cut off his access to classified information. That's what the president should do. There's no law requiring the president to give anyone classified information. Schiff can't be trusted. He's abused his power and authority. I wouldn't give him classified information. The law doesn't require the president to do that. So, all of this tells you that Judicial Watch, once again, is front and center on all of these battles for government accountability, where the Justice Department is absent, the media is absent. Even Republicans, they don't care about Adam Schiff anymore. Adam Schiff almost blew up our government. He engaged in a coup attack on the president. Where's the accountability? Republicans don't care. They're too busy trying to keep themselves in office. That's why you need independent groups like Judicial Watch. One of the ways that Judicial Watch holds the government accountable is by educating people about what we find. I mean, we're an educational foundation. And if people don't know about what we're doing, it doesn't matter all the FOIA lawsuits and such. And of course, these days we have to use these big tech platforms to expose what's been going on. And so we have a significant presence on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, and on YouTube. And I'm on those platforms as well. And as you know, we've been skeptical, at least I've been skeptical of all the government shutdown, government ordered shutdowns of our nation in response to the coronavirus threat. And I've just been generally skeptical of mandates related to masks and mandates related to social distancing and closing schools and all of that. So there was this big study that came out that raised questions. It was a Fauci standard study that I've we're all supposed to think is the only way of figuring out whether something works or not. But anyway, they did the Fauci standard study. It was some people had masks on, some people didn't have masks on, and it you can go look it up. It's been well reported on, and now it's being spun on. It questioned the efficacy of masks in terms of protecting the wearer from coronavirus. So I did a tweet on that, and Twitter, after a day, told me that my account was frozen for 12 hours unless I took the tweet down, and then it would be opened up. But they also told me I could appeal the tweet. First of all, the tweet I said, and I don't want to repeat it now for fear of getting censored elsewhere, it was a perfectly accurate conclusion about the Danish study. There was nothing wrong about it. There was nothing unfair about it or misleading. It was accurate. And of course, I'm being targeted by Twitter because I have a big following, because I'm a conservative, because I'm seen as supportive of President Trump. And when I say I'm being supportive of President Trump, the left translates, well, you have to be a Trump acolyte, as opposed to, well, I don't want someone, our presidency, to be attacked by coosters, as I call them. I want the rule of law to prevail. So therefore, I have a target on my back, and Judicial Watch has a target on its back by the left. And so I'm still not on Twitter. They said 12 hours, and they said, well, you can appeal. So I appealed. But by appealing, it tolls the clock, meaning I can't get back on. Now, if I end the appeal and delete the tweet, I can get back on, or so they say. But it's Twitter, so they act like petty little tyrants, so who knows? So if you want to read the tweet, you can go to, I posted it on Parler, Parler. I have an account there under Tom Fitton. But big tech is a threat to the First Amendment. And I don't need a lecture that private companies don't have to abide by the First Amendment, but they can't engage in fraud. And they can't tell you that you have the freedom to post, and they'll treat it fairly, and they won't target you, and they will make decisions fairly, when in fact, that's not the case. It's demonstrated that's not the case. They're target conservatives. And in the case of COVID, they are censoring medical information or critiques of government policies in ways never seen before. So in many ways, they're tools for government agencies. In the case of Twitter, they talk about WHO. So it's not even an agency that's technically accountable to the United States. We don't even give them money anymore. So I guess eventually I'm going to have to delete the tweet. I'm still ticked about it, as you might imagine, because I want to educate people. I'm not going to be bullied off these platforms, nor should you. And this is what I think everyone should do. I mean, first of all, we should acknowledge that Twitter and Facebook are not engaged in good faith moderation of its content. In fact, I was watching the hearing this week. They had a hearing earlier this week where Jack Dorsey, who runs Twitter, and Mark Zuckerberg, who is the owner of Facebook or runs Facebook, was questioned by members of the Senate Judiciary Committee and Senator Richard Blumenthal, I believe. And so the conservatives on the committee were talking about Twitter and Facebook dishonestly censoring conservatives. And the left on the committee said they weren't censoring conservatives enough. In fact, Richard Blumenthal said, will you commit to, and this is the phrase, robust content modification? Robust content modification. If that's not Orwellian, I don't know what is. And of course, both Dorsey and Zuckerberg committed to that. They're preventing, for instance, on Facebook, Judicial Watch from paying for its educational advertisements on that platform. Again, we're in the business of educating people about the things we uncover about the government. Facebook is getting in the way of that for political purposes. They're both labeling falsely as, quote, disputed election issues. I mean, for a while, they were saying official sources have said that Vice President Biden won. No official there's only one official source that can certify the vice president as victor in the presidency. You've got the states that certify that, and then the Electoral College meets, and that's certified, and then ultimately it's blessed by Congress. So no official sources have said Joe Biden has become president. The media has, but the Constitution doesn't let the media choose who's the president. So we have to stand fast. It's unfortunate that, like for instance, on Twitter, I can't say what I really believe about COVID. I don't think I can say it on Facebook either, and it's unlikely I can do it on YouTube. I've already been censored. Judicial Watch has been censored repeatedly, but we're going to keep on telling the truth. And like in any oppressive system, you've got to be careful about what you say and how you say it. Now, we're not going to obviously sell out in that regard, but it's a conundrum. Don't you agree? I mean, Twitter and Facebook, as far as I'm concerned, they're destroying themselves. They are destroying themselves. I mean, it may be a point where I can't be on Twitter anymore because I don't know what I can say without being smeared and labeled and censored. Same thing for Judicial Watch. Maybe we'll have to leave Twitter. Maybe we'll have to leave YouTube or Facebook. I don't know. But they're destroying their business models to appease the totalitarian left that wants to censor conservatives. And we're facing this period. It's been a remarkable 4 years in American history for a variety of reasons, and I can go on and on about it. But most recently and most troublingly, the last year I call the Great Suppression. You've had the Great Suppression of information about COVID. You've had the Great Suppression of information about voter fraud, about the coup cabal targeting President Trump. Remember, I can't say, I think on Twitter I could, but since this is going to be on YouTube and other platforms, I can't say the name of the so-called whistleblower that helped initiate the coup process against President Trump that resulted in impeachment. I still can't say his name, even though he's a top government official who worked in the White House, in 2 White Houses. Unbelievable. So we're now in the middle of the Great Suppression. And if you think it's going to ease up under a President Biden, certainly it's not going to ease up under President Trump because he's the target. Now, is Congress going to change the law to protect the rights of Americans in this regard? Or to hold the government of clarify the law to make it clear that the corrupt fraud they're engaged in and content moderation doesn't protect them from being held account for it by federal law, or federal law doesn't protect them from being held account for it? Or will lawsuits, Judicial Watch sues a lot. Maybe we'll sue, I don't know. Get a court to come in and say, you can't do what you're doing. You're lying to consumers. You're lying to your customers when you say these terms of service are being fairly implemented and are reliable and aren't being changed on a whim depending on who you are or your politics. All sorts of laws prohibit that type of activity. Basic false advertising, laws against false advertising. So I don't want to go on too long about this. I'll probably be back on Twitter soon. Hopefully I don't say anything else that gets me banned permanently. But we're prepared. We're prepared. Judicial Watch gets emails from the government, and we've gotten documents finally on Burisma. We had sued. When did we sue? January 2020. So it took them 11 months almost to get us these documents about Burisma. We asked for records of communications from the U.S. Embassy in Kiev, our embassy, mentioning Burisma. Now, you may recall that the State Department shut down their FOIA operations in response to the COVID pandemic. Frankly, it was more of an excuse than anything else. So this is what happens. My microphone is attached to the computer, and when I move, the microphone wire pulls, and that's why the computer moves. So that's what's happening there. So they finally gave us what is a briefing memo showing that the Democratic lobbying firm hired by Burisma met with the anti-Trump ambassador, Ambassador Yovanovitch. She's the woman who testified against Obama during the impeachment hearings. And in my view, she's responsible for covering up a lot of corruption going on in Ukraine vis-a-vis Biden, the Ukrainian interferers in our election, the Soros operation, all sorts of stuff that was going on her watch. And we got these documents, and it's a briefing checklist about a meeting she was having with this Burisma law firm called Blue Star Strategies, whose chief operating officer and co-founder is Sally Painter. So Painter was going in to meet with Yovanovitch on a variety of issues. One of those issues notes that she was planning a meeting in the embassy with the Foreign Commercial Service officer regarding the Burisma Group energy company. Now, this was happening in when? February 22nd, 2019, the middle of the impeachment attack just before the impeachment attack on President Trump. Excuse me, I shouldn't say it was the middle of it. I forget that the impeachment was just a few months ago. I forget. It goes back further in time as the weeks go along, but it was only the beginning of the year, right? So in February of 2019, they're meeting with Hunter Biden's lobbying shop. Now, Hunter Biden was still on the board of Burisma at the time. So yeah, it was his lobbying shop, this Blue Star Strategies. And Sally Painter, the person running it, Judicial Watch has run into before. How? Well, we found documents during the Chinagate scandal, back during the Clinton years. And back then, she was at the Commerce Department, and she was implicated in the alleged sale of Commerce Department trade mission seats, where the government would pay for trade missions abroad to get contracts for companies abroad. And they were basically saying, you pony up to the Democratic National Committee or the Clinton campaign, you get a seat on the trade mission. And Painter's fingerprints were all over that. So it's no surprise to see her pop up again with this Burisma scandal. And the records also show that in 2016, an email from a sender, whose name is blacked out, was sent to a person called Amos Hochstein, who is a senior advisor to Vice President Joe Biden on international energy affairs. Hochstein was an expert in energy, unlike Hunter Biden. And the subject line was Burisma News Devin Archer. And Devin Archer was Hunter Biden's business partner in Burisma and also on the board of Burisma. The email includes links to two articles, one by the New York Post on May 12, 2016, which detail how Archer, a business partner of Hunter Biden and also a member of the Burisma board of directors, had been arrested on suspicion of securities fraud in a $60 million scam that ripped off impoverished South Dakota, Sioux, Indian, and others. And the records also, so you had Joe Biden's top aide, one of his top aides, getting a heads up on a scandal implicating his son, Joe's son's business partner. Now, his business partner, this story is back up here again because he was, I think, convicted, but the judge threw out the conviction, and this appellate court reinstated it. So now he's facing now Devin Archer is facing sentencing. He could be going to jail on this. I'm sure he's unhappy camper too. That's what Giuliani said. And the records also include, and I've told you about how the Ukraine embassy gang under Yovanovitch was monitoring the social media accounts of Rudy Giuliani and Don Trump Jr., Dan Bongino, Sean Hannity, Laura Ingraham, Lou Dobbs, because they were nervous about what they were saying about Burisma, Joe Biden, Soros, and all the rest. And these emails further confirm how they were desperate to monitor all of this. And they were monitoring all of these people's tweets. If they were doing it in an organized fashion, would be illegal. It's a violation of the Privacy Act. So we have new Burisma documents showing that the anti-Trump State Department knew about the shady Biden-Burisma connections and were desperate to monitor conservative critics of the Bidens. Desperate. So don't believe the laptop. Don't believe Tony Bobulinski, excuse me, and I say that sarcastically. Believe the documents. The Obama State Department knew very much about the Burisma scandal. I told you previously about other documents, emails from a State Department official, another anti-Trump State Department official testified against Trump in the impeachment, sent to Yovanovitch, bemoaning the fact the Russians were trolling Joe Biden over his ethical compromise or his conflicts of interest in terms of ethics with having his son be on the board of that corrupt company, Burisma. Kent called it Burisma, the gift that keeps on giving. They all knew about Burisma and Biden. And as I keep on saying, the dirty little secret about Joe Biden is there was no dirty little secret about his corruption. And many people knew about it. So we expect to get more documents. As I say, the Biden scandal ain't going away no matter what happens on a day. So there's that.
But here's a little simple chart of the Biden crime family. And these are the 4 countries while he was vice president that he took bribes from. In Iraq, Joe Biden was appointed as the point man for Iraq. He was supposed to negotiate for a status of forces agreement so that we could protect the people of Iraq. He failed to get it, but his brother got a 1/3 interest in a $1.5 billion housing development project in Iraq. And his brother was a lifetime sleazy lobbyist, knew nothing about housing. So that's the first one. When he gets appointed as the point man for Ukraine, his son is just getting thrown out of the Navy for being a crack addict, which he is, and he's a lifetime degenerate crack addict, due mostly to his father. If you want to blame somebody for that, you blame Joe for putting his son in a lifetime of crime. He could have found some bum in Washington to collect this money. He did not have to use his drug-addicted son, but that's what he chose. His son gets hired for a position for which he has no experience. He's really disqualified by virtue of being a proven drug addict. He had a bankruptcy in his past, and they put him into the biggest and crookedest oil and gas company, Burisma, in Ukraine. But there's a reason for it. The reason for it is the man, Mykola Zlochevsky, ran away. He ran away with $5 billion, and he wanted to come back and claim his business. The only way you could do that is to make a deal with the president of Ukraine, Poroshenko, a very good friend of Joe Biden's and a massive crook. So Joe became the go-between. That's why Hunter Biden was paid a total of $14 million in order to do nothing.
So he got the board money, he got the payments monthly, but there were additional consulting payments.
There were additional laundered payments that now the amount really, depending on how you attribute money, between 10 and 14 million.
And those and that info comes from Ukrainian sources, or
all comes from Ukrainian sources, and about 4 million of it is laundered. It goes from Ukraine to Latvia to Cyprus. They make believe it's a loan. They then send it to them, and they forgive the loan. Typical.
Well, you figured that out last year, though.
Oh, this did not require the hard drives. I gave this evidence to the Department of Justice in January of this year, and they have not interviewed a single witness, and there are 6 of them over there ready to be interviewed, and they're ready to show them the documents.
What is but we could get to China. I don't want to skip China.
Well, China's the big one. China involves all 3 of his bag men, and China involves 2 deals. The one is the one I mentioned before. He takes his son to China. He fails to negotiate the Chinese out of the islands they dispute with Japan. And his son gets a $1 billion commitment to the private equity fund that included Whitey Bulger's nephew. And then he gets an additional $500 million for a total of $1.5 billion, all received while Joe Biden was our vice president, supposedly negotiating in a disinterested manner. I mean, don't you think the American people have a right to know that the man negotiating against our biggest adversary, that his son has gotten $1.5 billion for a make-believe, silly, stupid private equity fund? How Obama could hide that from us has to amount to something.
So the Biden defenders say, look, they kind of admit tacitly that these business operations were taking place. They deny that Biden got money. Other than the text where they say, where Hunter is saying, I'm doing this for the family, I'm tired of doing all this work for the family, and it's clearly Biden's the big guy, all that. Do you have evidence, or what is the evidence that shows that he was getting money directly or indirectly from these various deals and transactions you're talking about?
There is evidence of that, but that really isn't necessary. You can be bribed. I mean, I can say, yeah, I'll let you out of prison. Let's say I'm the prosecutor. I'll let you out of prison, but just give my son $1 million. You don't have to be the recipient of the money to commit bribery. You can say, give it to my daughter, give it to my best friend. That constitutes a bribe. But did he get money? Yes. First of all, there's the one I mentioned where he says to his daughter, he got one-half of everything I got right off the top.
Right.
Went into a special account for him. Hunter says that. And then there's the memo that we discovered. It was hidden. There's a contract, 50% for the Bidens, 50% for the Chinese communists. That's going to be $10 million a year, not pennies, $1 million up front. And then there's a hidden agreement. The hidden agreement lists at the bottom one additional person getting money. It says 10% to H for the big guy. So we went back into the hard drive. We produced 2 other documents where Hunter refers to his father as the big guy. And now Mr. Bobulinski has testified and is willing to has given a sworn statement to the FBI, I should add, saying that he was called the big guy and everybody knew Joe was getting money. Joe discussed it with him. So, I mean, that's pretty much a closed case. I mean, I could get an indictment based on that. There's enough evidence to get an indictment. You've got documentary evidence. You prove who the big guy is. He's getting 10% by 2 internal documents that are contemporary. You've got Bobulinski who testifies to it. I suspect by the time you finish, the 2 other outside guys, Gillers and I've forgotten the other guy's name, Wilson
Kevin
or something.
Archer.
Kevin Archer's going to crack.
Yeah.
Kevin Archer, there's a text in there from Kevin Archer to Hunter saying, why do I have to take the rap for the whole family? He's very bitter. He's very angry. He feels he's the only one that went to jail, and he's going back to jail. He got convicted, and then a judge with political connections to them, it's hard to believe, reversed the conviction, and the Second Circuit reversed the judge.
One of the other abuses we've seen is DC Mayor Bowser, who had the city paint near the White House on 16th Street. So picture the White House. Let's say it's facing north. So this is the let's say this is the White House right here, and this is 16th Street, and 16th Street comes right into it. And she painted on that using your tax dollars. And I say yours in the sense it's not just local money that helps DC, because it's the federal city. It gets taxpayer dollars from all over the country to paint the phrase Black Lives Matter, which, as you know, is controversial. But individual Americans have a right to go around and make arguments about that. But the government's putting that statement on the streets of DC. And then they allowed protesters to add equals defund the police. which is really outrageous. Just outside the White House. So what can we do about it? You know, we saw that they had done that and we thought, my gosh, isn't that interesting? Now, the District of Columbia government seems to tell us that the streets of DC are now is a forum for free expression under the First Amendment. So what we did was we asked the DC mayor for permission to paint Judicial Watch's motto, because no one is above the law. I don't have my shirt, my Judicial Watch shirt. I'd show it to you otherwise. Because no one above the law, because no one is above the law has been our motto for years. It's our motto and our motivation. On a Capitol Hill Street, specifically Independence Avenue. So again, if you think of the Capitol and it's looking out, this is the Capitol looking out towards the Washington Monument, and Independence Avenue kind of comes right there. Two main streets on either side of the mall. We wanted to paint our motto because evidently it's free speech on the streets in terms of being allowed to paint on them. So this is the letter we sent. I signed it to Mayor Bowser and the Attorney General of DC, Karl Racine. We note with interest Mayor Bowser's recent decision approving the painting of Black Lives Matter on 16th Street Northwest and the approval and/or acquiescence in the painting of Defund the Police alongside the first message. Both messages are expressive activity. I mean, I don't like the phrase defund the police. I object to it. I think it's a terrible policy for all the reasons I've been talking about. People go around and say it. I mean, it's America, or at least as of today, it's America, if you know what I mean, in terms of having our freedoms protected. Judicial Watch is a Washington, D.C. based nonprofit organization, which means you can donate, by the way, headquartered in Southwest D.C. For more than 25 years, Judicial Watch has promoted transparency, accountability, transparency, accountability, and integrity in government and fidelity to the rule of law. Our motto is, because no one is above the law, a message that is particularly relevant today because it applies equally to law enforcement and public officials, as well as to protesters, looters, and rioters. Because DC street surfaces are now being used as a public fora for expressive activity, we would like to have our motto painted on a street, preferably Independence Avenue Southwest, between 2nd and 4th Street Southwest, which is near our offices. The lettering would be identical in size and color to the lettering used to paint Black Lives Matter on 16th Street Northwest. Judicial Watch would pay the cost of the painting, but we would likely need the assistance of the DC government to aid in traffic diversion and parking restrictions while the painting is completed. Of course, the painting could be completed when traffic is typically light, as was done with the Black Lives Matter message. As the timeliness of our message is important, please respond within 3 working days. If the Independence Avenue location is not possible, we are open to considering alternative locations. Thank you for your prompt attention to this matter. So we want to paint because no one is above the law on a Capitol Hill Street, and we think we have the right to do so based on the DC government deciding to allow or paint Black Lives Matter and allow to have painted Defund the Police near the White House. Now, I don't know how under law they could deny us reasonably the right to do that. Are they going to discriminate against us based on our viewpoint? Either by saying no or imposing such onerous restrictions that it would be impossible for us to do this? If so, Judicial Watch is prepared to go to court to vindicate our First Amendment rights. Mayor Bowser isn't above the law. The DC government isn't above the law. You know, and as I say, this rule of law message is timely. It's a reminder that the rule of law applies to and protects all Americans. All Americans. That's what makes this attack on the rule of law so pernicious, because they pretend they're protecting certain segments of our population. In fact, they're putting the whole nation at risk. Every citizen, every non-citizen even. So we'll see what the mayor responds with officially. As I indicate in our letter, we're prepared to be flexible. If not that location, give us another one. We'll pay for the paint. We'll pay for the paint. We'll get the contractors. We'll do whatever's necessary within reason to put this message out there.
For me, as a journalist, it was always Judicial Watch, especially after I started working years ago in California, covering the U.S.-Mexico border and immigration, something that Judicial Watch was at the forefront, I believe, in investigating the bureaucracy and all of the loopholes and actually the national security problems that we were having along the 2,000-mile border with Mexico. It was you guys were at the forefront. You were the ones fighting the system and fighting for documents that the government was refusing to give up on. Did you ever think, decades ago, when you were fighting for those documents, when you were looking at, immigration issues, border issues, law enforcement issues, that we'd ever end up at this point that we're in today, that there was this much malfeasance and corruption inside the U.S. government?
Well, we were first and foremost in going after Clinton corruption. Right. So nothing really shocks us or surprises us in that regard. Obama was terribly corrupt. Remember, we had the IRS scandal. We had the Benghazi scandal that Judicial Watch helped break open. So in many ways, it's not surprising, but it's still upsetting and shocking. You know it's bad, and then you get evidence how bad it is, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. And what happened with Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and all the rest, including appointees of President Trump, in terms of targeting of Trump, there's really been no scandal like it in American history. But you really have to go to foreign countries to get that type of corruption.
Well, I always say, it reminded me so much, even when I was first working in 2016, 2015, even with John Solomon, on uncovering what we eventually called the Russia hoax or the Russia scandal, Obamagate. I thought, am I in the United States of America, or am I in a banana republic?
Well, you go back and you recognize that it worked before for Barack Obama. In 2012, he used the IRS to target his political enemies, and it helped suppress the Tea Party movement. It kept him in office. He used also the FBI. They gathered records about these Tea Party groups. They were thinking of prosecuting them. Remember our friend Catherine Engelbrecht?
Right.
She had the FBI knocking on her door.
I remember that very well.
So they used the powers of government back then to successfully change, in my view, the outcome of the election. That's how you steal election in plain sight. Suppress an entire political movement that had organized against you. So 2016 comes around. Oh, lo and behold, they do the same thing again. They use these agencies of government to target their political opposition, and now we know why they were doing it.
We'll say it.
Our theory of the case was to protect Hillary.
Right.
And you may recall, and some people get tired of us talking about the Clinton emails, but my point has always been is that the Clinton emails were the reason we're in the state we're in.
It was the pinnacle of everything.
That's right, and they wanted to cover it up and protect her, and it was never just about Hillary. It was about the Obama Justice Department, State Department, FBI, Defense Department. All of them were implicated in the email scandal, and it turns out the White House was implicated.
I want to go to something, though, and I think this is really important, probably something that all of you out there are thinking as well. I know I get emails all the time and letters from readers, from viewers that ask this question. why does it seem that this isn't just an Obama problem? And I'm going to talk about this. Everybody calls President Trump the disruptor, right? I always say it was the American people that were the disruptors. But when you look at the 2016 inauguration, when President Trump was inaugurated, and you see how tight former President Bush, former President Bill Clinton were to Barack Obama and to what happened, and how angry they were towards President Trump's success, you have American people out there all the time, and Tom, I know you know this town better than anyone, saying to me, this isn't just a Democrat problem. This is a problem with the establishment, with the system. I mean, are they right?
Oh, they sure are. I mean, you had, I was talking to Sean Hannity today on the radio earlier today. And, you know, there were two issues that we were facing. We're facing socialism. You know, big government usually means big corruption. So we kind of always knew that here at Judicial Watch. But on top of that, you really just had corruption, just base corruption. We saw that with Hillary Clinton, the way she turned the State Department, and we go through this exhaustively in the book, that the State Department was turned into a cash machine, cash cow for her and the foundation. Her husband was raking in tens of millions of dollars in speaking fees that were going to her in part. Remember?
Right.
You know, they're married, remember?
Right.
So, you know, presumably they share the cash.
$500,000 for one speech from Renaissance Bank. And I think people forget this. In Russia, and Renaissance Bank was actually run by the FSB, former FSB, which is Russian KGB, former Soviet KGB. This is incredible, but no one focuses in on, this is the problem. You've got a media, right? Mm-hmm. Very few people that are telling the truth the way Tom Fitton is in this book, folks. Very few people, because you have the Washington Post, the New York Times, the major players, CNN, MSNBC, ignoring it for the most part, not even asking the questions. So explain to me, when you find out, when you see documents that former President Bill Clinton is paid $500,000 for a speech by a Russian bank connected to Russian intelligence, what goes through your mind?
Well, obviously that money is inflated. And so what are they getting for their money? What were these major corporations here in town getting for their money? They were similarly giving him big money. And of course, none of the Republicans brought them in to say, well, why did you give Bill Clinton this obviously inflated speaking fee? What were you expecting in return? What was your return on investment?
Right.
And that question, now we know, needed to be asked of Hunter Biden, who was obviously getting business tied to his father's office. At the same time, Hillary was raking it in at the State Department. So it's one thing, now we know, look, they needed to protect,
pattern,
they
right?
needed to protect Hillary, but there was more they needed to protect.
Themselves?
That's exactly right. So what did Obama know, and when did he know it with Hillary? We've got 20 plus emails between the two of them. Then we've got Joe Biden doing exactly what we were concerned about Hillary Clinton doing, except we didn't know it at the time. I mean, there were indications of it in the media, but the media wasn't interested in pursuing the obvious corruption there. And so President Trump, being the intuitive person he is, he knew there was this incipient corruption with Hillary Clinton. And then he gets into office and he figures out what was going on with Ukraine and Joe Biden.
But he wasn't playing the game. He wasn't playing the Washingtonian game. He wasn't dealing and wheeling.
And he cuts to the chase and he says, what was going on with Joe Biden and Burisma? And
just like any American.
And why aren't you investigating it? Mm-hmm. And they went crazy.
And they being both
the Coup cabal, the leftist establishment, the Adam Schiffs of the world, the whole media establishment. And when you look back on it,
do you think the Republicans are to blame for this too? I mean, look, we have people on both sides.
No one defended him
right.
for highlighting this corruption. And what's been frustrating to me is how alone the president has been. And I go through this in the book. I'm convinced Judicial Watch saved the Trump president.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch all the latest news from Judicial Watch.